The first time I met her, she opened the door like someone expecting a ghost. Not wide, just enough for her to see me, for me to see her. Light spilled across her face, catching in the strands of her loose hair. She looked like she hadn't decided whether to invite me in or send me away. I remember thinking that for someone who owned a house that beautiful, she carried herself like a tenant who might be asked to leave at any moment. I was just there to fix the porch railing. That's all it was supposed to be. A 2-hour job, maybe 3 if the wood was worse than it looked. But from the way she said, "It's been coming loose for a while," I could tell she wasn't talking about the porch. Her name was Claire. Mid-40s, maybe. Elegant without trying, the kind of woman whose calm filled a room before her words did. When she turned to lead me inside, I noticed how quietly she moved, as if sound might betray her. The air inside her house smelled like cedar and rain-soaked curtains. A faint trace of paint lingered. She'd been trying to fix things herself. The tools on the counter were clean, untouched. "You've done some work already," I said, glancing at the brushes. She smiled, thin and polite. "I start things. Finishing isn't my strength." I laughed softly, not sure if it was allowed. She didn't look up. Her fingers trailed the edge of the counter, like she was trying to remember something that used to be there. When I crouched by the porch beam, I could feel her eyes on me, not curious, exactly. Just present. Like she was watching to make sure I didn't fall apart the way the wood had. Every so often, I'd glance up, and she'd look away too quickly. Hours passed quietly. The only sounds were the scrape of metal and the hum of her kettle inside. When she came back out, she handed me a mug. Her fingers brushed mine, not by accident, but not intentionally either. Something in between. Warm, unsure. "Tea," she said. "You look like you drink tea." "I'll take that as a compliment," I replied. She tilted her head, amused, and for the first time her smile reached her eyes. It didn't last. "Must be strange," she murmured, "fixing things that aren't yours." "Maybe," I said. "But sometimes it's easier than fixing your own." She looked at me then, really looked. Like she wanted to ask something and couldn't find the words. That silence between us felt heavier than anything I'd ever built. The afternoon light turned gold. I could see dust floating through it like time suspended. She stood a little closer now, her shoulder almost grazing mine, as she watched me drive in the last nail. The air tightened. "Perfect," she said quietly. Her voice was too soft for the word. When I stood, she stepped back, almost as if she'd been caught. I could still feel her warmth near me, the ghost of her scent, jasmine and something faintly sweet, like the edge of a memory. I wanted to say something easy, something normal, but my voice didn't come. She saved me from the silence. "You should come by tomorrow," she said, glancing toward the loose steps at the corner of the porch. "There's more that needs fixing." I nodded, though I didn't look away from her. She turned to leave, her hand on the doorknob. Just before she went inside, she paused, then looked back, eyes unreadable. "Be careful with the wood," she said. "It breaks easily." The door closed softly behind her. And for reasons I couldn't explain, I stood there a long time, staring at the place where her hand had just been. Then, from inside, I heard the faint sound of something falling. A cup, maybe. Or maybe something else had cracked first. When I came back the next day, she was already outside. No makeup this time. Just a loose white shirt, sleeves rolled up, her hair tied carelessly, like she'd been caught between chores and a thought. She waved, then stopped midway, her hand lowering as if she'd forgotten what to do with it. "Morning," I said, setting my toolbox down. "Morning," she echoed, her voice softer than the word deserved. The steps were worse than I remembered. Rotted edges, loose nails, old paint that peeled away at a touch. Still, It was easier to face wood than to face her eyes. She lingered nearby, leaning against the post. "You're good at this," she said. "Do you do it for a living?" "Part-time." "Between classes?" "College." I nodded. Something flickered across her face, not surprise, exactly. More like realization. "You're young." I smiled faintly. "Older than I look." She didn't answer. Just folded her arms, as if that might hide the fact that she'd said too much. For a while, we stayed quiet. The rhythm of hammering filled the space where words didn't fit. But every so often, I'd catch her watching me, her gaze tracing my hands, then darting away when I noticed. I told myself not to think about it. But when her hand brushed my shoulder as she passed behind me, the thought became impossible to ignore. "Sorry," she murmured. "Didn't mean to startle you." "You didn't." That was a lie. Her touch lingered in the air long after she stepped away. Inside the house, she poured water into 2 glasses, her back to me. "My husband used to do things like this," she said quietly. "Before he stopped trying." It wasn't an invitation for pity, just a fact, offered to the silence. I wanted to ask why he stopped, but the question would have crossed a line I wasn't ready to name. "He left?" I asked instead. Her shoulders tensed, then relaxed. "No. I did." She turned then, glass in hand, and our eyes met. There was something in hers, not pride, not regret. Something in between. "Sometimes," she said, "you wake up one day and realize you're living in someone else's version of home." I took the glass, fingers grazing hers again. The same quiet electricity, too brief to be accidental. I could feel my pulse in the tips of my fingers. When she sat beside me on the porch step, I felt the warmth of her leg through my jeans. She didn't move away, and neither did I. A slow breeze stirred the air. Her hair brushed against my arm. The scent of jasmine again, softer this time, mixed with something like sunlight and dust. "I'm not usually good with people," I said. "But you." She looked at me, waiting. "You make it easy to stay." Her eyes softened, and for a heartbeat, I thought she might say something, anything. But she didn't. She just smiled faintly, almost grateful, and rested her hand on the porch rail between us. Our fingers didn't touch, but they might as well have. The silence grew comfortable, almost too comfortable. Then, from somewhere inside the house, a phone began to ring. She stood quickly, her composure snapping back like a curtain drawn too fast. "I should get that," she said. As she disappeared inside, her hand brushed mine one last time. Not by mistake. Not quite on purpose. When the door closed again, I realized something dangerous had shifted, not in the wood beneath us, but in whatever fragile line we were pretending not to see. The third day, the air between us felt different, stretched thin, like it could tear with one wrong word. I told myself I was only there to finish the porch steps, but when she opened the door, barefoot and half laughing from a phone call she quickly ended, I forgot what I was supposed to fix. "Sorry," she said, brushing a loose strand of hair behind her ear. "You're early. You said 10. She checked her watch, flustered. "Right." I lost track of time. Her smile lingered a second too long. Mine, probably longer. Inside, the smell of coffee filled the kitchen. 2 mugs sat on the counter. One half drunk. One untouched. She noticed me looking. "I made extra," she said quietly. "In case you wanted some." The simple words landed heavier than they should have. We moved through the morning carefully, both pretending not to notice how often we brushed against each other in narrow hallways, or how her voice softened when she said my name. Each time she leaned closer to hand me a tool, her sleeve brushed my arm, and my focus slipped. She noticed. Of course she did. Careful, she said once, her voice low. You'll cut your hand if you don't watch what you're doing. I am watching, I said before I could stop myself. Her eyes lifted to mine. The silence after that felt like something alive. I thought she might step back, she didn't. Instead, her hand hovered near mine, trembling slightly, as if deciding whether to close the distance. Then a voice called from outside. Claire? You home? She froze. The sound came again, a woman's voice, older, familiar. Without thinking, she grabbed my wrist, pulling me behind the open door. Just don't move, she whispered. Her hand on me was small but firm. I could feel her pulse through her fingers. The door hid most of me, but I could still see the edge of her face as she smiled toward the window. Oh, hey, Janet, she called out, voice suddenly bright, controlled. Just working on the porch again. Her grip didn't loosen. Neither of us breathed until the footsteps faded away down the path. When the silence returned, she turned to me slowly. Our faces were inches apart. Her breath hitched, brushing against my cheek. I didn't mean to grab you like that, she said, not moving. It's fine, I whispered. But neither of us moved away. The quiet between us deepened until it wasn't quiet anymore. It was a hum beneath the skin, a heartbeat shared. Her eyes fell to my mouth, then flicked back up. My hand lifted without thinking, stopping just short of her jaw. The air between us felt electric, fragile, wrong, and completely inevitable. Then she exhaled, shaking her head slightly. We can't, she said, almost to herself. I know, I said. And yet, neither of us stepped back. Outside, the wind caught the chime by her window, scattering soft notes through the stillness. She looked at me one last time, eyes wide with something that felt like fear and want twisted together. Tomorrow, she whispered. It wasn't a promise. It was a surrender waiting to happen. Rain came that morning, the kind that softened everything it touched. I almost didn't go, thought maybe a day's distance would calm the noise in my head. But by noon, I found myself walking up her drive again, soaked through, toolbox in hand, inventing excuses I didn't believe. She opened the door before I could knock. Her hair was loose, her sweater oversized, her eyes already knowing. You'll ruin your tools out there, she said softly. I couldn't stay away. She didn't answer. Just stepped aside, letting me in. The house was dim, quiet except for the rain against the windows. She set a towel on the table, her fingers brushing mine when she passed it over. You shouldn't say things like that, she whispered. Like what? Like you couldn't stay away. I smiled faintly. Then maybe you shouldn't open the door so fast. That earned the smallest laugh from her, fragile, real. But the laughter died as quickly as it came. You don't understand what this looks like, she said. If anyone knew. I don't care what anyone thinks. Well, I do. Her voice cracked, not from anger, but from something rawer. I'm twice your age. I'm supposed to know better. The words hung between us like smoke, painful, undeniable. I took a step closer. She didn't move. Do you? I asked quietly. Her breath trembled. No, she said, almost too soft to hear. Silence filled the space where reason should have been. The rain outside grew louder, pressing against the walls. She turned slightly, her face only inches from mine. Her hand lifted, hesitant, then fell again, until I caught it midair, holding it between us like something fragile and forbidden. You make it hard to breathe when you look at me like that, she murmured. Then don't look away, I said. Her eyes met mine, tired, beautiful, terrified. Please, she whispered, don't do this to me. I'm not doing anything, I said. I'm just here. And I was, close enough to feel her warmth through the air, close enough to see the tiny tremor in her lower lip. I reached up without thinking, brushing a strand of hair from her face. My fingertips grazed her cheek, damp from the rain or maybe from tears she hadn't noticed. She leaned into the touch, barely, and that small, helpless movement broke whatever restraint I had left. I stepped closer. Her breath hitched, I could feel it on my neck. "If I kiss you," I whispered, "nothing will be the same." Her voice was barely audible. "It already isn't." The distance between us disappeared, almost. My lips hovered just above hers, close enough to feel the heat, not enough to cross the line. The world had gone silent, except for her heartbeat against my chest. Then, a sound. The front gate creaked open. She froze. Pulled back just enough to breathe. "Someone's here," she said. Her eyes met mine again, wild, searching. "Don't move," she breathed. "Please." And just like that, the moment collapsed, suspended in that trembling inch of space between what almost happened and what still could. It wasn't a stranger at the gate. When she stepped outside to look, the voice that called her name made her freeze mid-step, warm, casual, too familiar. "Claire." A man's voice. Steady. Unhurried. I heard the door click shut behind her, and for the first time, I realized she hadn't mentioned anyone from her past except her husband, the one she'd left. I couldn't hear their words clearly through the rain, only the tone, his low, coaxing, hers tight and short, as if trying to end something before it began. Then silence. The kind that sounds like something ending quietly. When she came back in, her face was pale, her shoulders stiff. "Everything okay?" I asked. She looked at me for a long time before answering. "That was Daniel. The husband." Her pause was answer enough. "He's been calling." I didn't answer. I guess he got tired of waiting. She set her phone down on the counter, fingers trembling. "He thinks I'm alone here." I didn't say anything. The air felt heavier than before, the rain outside quieter somehow. She sank onto the couch, her hands clasped tightly together. "We're not divorced." "Not officially." "I just left. I told you it was over, but maybe I wanted to believe it was." Her honesty hit like a soft blow, not betrayal, just truth I hadn't earned yet. "You don't owe me an explanation," I said. "Maybe not. But I owe myself one." She laughed bitterly, shaking her head. "What are we doing, really? You're what, 23? I have shoes older than that." Her attempt at humor cracked halfway through. I stepped closer, slow enough for her to stop me if she wanted. She didn't. Her breath wavered. "You shouldn't look at me like that." "Like what?" "Like I'm not broken." She stood suddenly, brushing past me toward the window. The scent of rain clung to her sweater, warm and sharp. Her hand trembled as she pulled the curtain back, staring out into the gray. "I thought leaving him would make me feel free," she whispered. "But now I just feel untethered. And you make me feel like I've done something unforgivable just by wanting to be seen again." I moved beside her, close enough that our reflections merged in the windowpane. "You haven't done anything wrong," I said. Her eyes flicked to my reflection, searching. "Then why do I feel like hiding every time someone knocks on that door?" Neither of us spoke for a while. The storm had quieted to a steady drizzle. She turned toward me then, slow and deliberate, like she'd already decided what she would do. Her hand rose to my chest, resting there lightly. I could feel the shake in her fingers, the thrum beneath her skin. "Tomorrow," she said, voice trembling. "When you come back, don't knock. Just come in." She stepped past me, her shoulder grazing mine, a touch that said too much and not enough. As the door to her room closed, I stood there staring at the space she'd left behind, heart pounding, realizing the risk wasn't falling for her. It was that I already had, When I came back the next day, the rain had gone, but the air still smelled like it remembered. Her door was unlocked, just as she'd said. I hesitated before opening it, hand hovering on the handle, as if crossing that line meant leaving something behind I'd never get back. Inside, the house was quiet, too quiet. A single lamp glowed in the corner, painting the room in soft amber. She was sitting by the window, hair loose around her shoulders, a book open but unread in her lap. She looked up when I stepped in. "You came. You told me not to knock." A small smile ghosted her lips. "I wasn't sure you'd listen." I set my toolbox down, though we both knew I hadn't come for the porch. For a long moment, neither of us moved. The silence wasn't empty, it was dense, thick with everything we'd been avoiding. "I thought about what you said," she murmured, eyes fixed on her hands. "About how nothing would be the same if we crossed that line." I swallowed hard. "And?" Her voice faltered. "Maybe it already isn't." She stood, slowly, as though the air itself might break. When she stepped toward me, I could hear the faint rustle of her clothes, the sound of her bare feet against the wood. Every sound felt amplified, her breathing, mine, the quiet creak of the floorboards closing the space between us. I didn't reach for her, not yet. I wanted her to decide. "You scare me," she whispered. "Why?" "Because you make me feel young again. And I don't trust it." Her words hit like a confession and a plea at once. I took a small step closer, enough that the light caught in her eyes. "You make me feel older," I said quietly. "In the best way." Her laugh was a breath, almost a sob. "That's not how this is supposed to go. Maybe that's what makes it real." Her hand lifted, fingers brushing my jaw, a feather-light touch, trembling with restraint. Her eyes searched mine, looking for permission neither of us had the right to give. "You should go," she whispered. "I can't." "Say it." Her voice broke. "Say why." "Because I want you," I said, the words trembling out of me. "Not the idea of you." "You?" She closed her eyes, a tear slipping free, though she smiled when it fell. "God, you make everything harder," she breathed, her forehead resting against mine. "Then stop fighting it," I whispered. She didn't. She just stood there, our breaths tangled, our hands finding each other without thought, the world shrinking to the few inches of air that still dared to exist between us. Her lips parted, not a kiss, not yet. Just a surrender of silence. And then, with a shaky breath, she said the thing that changed everything. "I don't want to be fixed," she murmured. "I just don't want to be alone when I fall apart." I cupped her face gently, feeling the warmth of her skin beneath my palms. "Then don't be." For a long moment, nothing else existed, not the porch, not the past, not the years between us. Just two people standing in the quiet, finally seeing each other completely. She didn't step back. And I didn't either. The next morning, the world looked softer. The clouds had cleared, the grass was still wet, and the porch, the one that started all of this, stood finished under the pale light. She was already outside, barefoot again, her sweater slipping off one shoulder. She looked calm, almost like herself for the first time since I'd met her. "I made coffee," she said, voice light but unsure. I joined her on the steps, 2 mugs between us, steam curling into the morning air. For a while, we said nothing, and somehow, it didn't feel like silence anymore. "You didn't leave," she said finally. "You didn't ask me to." Her lips curved slightly. "I almost did." "I know." A bird landed on the railing we'd fixed, testing the new wood. She smiled at that, a small, quiet smile that felt like forgiveness. "I kept waiting for this to feel wrong," she said, her voice low. "But it doesn't. Not the way I thought it would." "It's not wrong," I said. "Just complicated." She turned to me then, her eyes clearer, softer. You make it sound simple. It can be. I paused, searching for the right words. You once told me you start things you never finish. Maybe, this doesn't have to be one of them. Her breath caught, and then she laughed, a real laugh this time, unguarded and warm. She set her mug down, the sound soft against the wood, and rested her head on my shoulder. I could feel her heartbeat through the thin fabric of her sweater. It's strange, she murmured. When Daniel left, I thought I was done being wanted. I built this whole house around the idea of being alone. And then you showed up with a hammer, and no sense of boundaries. I smiled. Guess I just fix what I can. She looked up at me, eyes shining. And what happens when I break again? Then I'll be here, I said simply. Not to fix you. Just to stay. Her fingers found mine, tentative at first, then sure. The warmth of her hand fit easily into mine, like it had been waiting there. The sun rose a little higher, spilling gold over the porch. She turned toward me, and I saw the quiet peace in her face, the kind that comes after a storm finally spends itself. She leaned in, not a rush, not hesitation, just closeness. Her lips brushed my cheek, soft as breath. Then she rested her forehead against mine, eyes closed. I think, she whispered, you rebuilt more than my porch. I smiled against her skin. Piece by piece, I said. She laughed quietly, her fingers tightening around mine. We stayed like that, two people who had finally stopped pretending to be fine, sitting together, as the day began again. Did you enjoy the story? What kind of stories would you like to hear next?